director, number 10 on the list is get a chair, put your name on the back of the chair, and sit as much as possible because directing is exhausting. Okay, so this particular movie had a 20-day shooting schedule. So when Corman had the meeting with Alan Arkush, he noted Alan was taking extensive notes on the principles of Corman filmmaking. But when he came to that last item about getting a chair with his name on it, Alan put down his pen. He didn't take notes on that part. The result was that on the day that they shot the Rock and Roll High School musical number in the girls' gym, Alan Arkush woke up and his heart was racing and he was unable to stand up and his legs were numb and he was suffering from clinical exhaustion, had to be taken to the hospital and hooked up to an IV. So he called Joe Dante to come to the set and direct that musical number, even though before that day Dante knew nothing about it. Fortunately, they carried it off, as you will see. So if you're going to make a movie called Rock and Roll High School, you got to have a band worthy of that name. And the band they chose was the Ramones. PJ Souls, who's supposed to be playing the world's biggest Ramones fan, had never heard of the Ramones. But there's a dream sequence in the movie where Joey Ramone practically has sex with her while singing. And the writers had been greatly influenced by the great Frank Tashlin movie, The Girl Can't Help It, with Jane Mansfield. And there's a scene in The Girl Can't Help It where Tom Ewell is fantasizing about Julie London, and she suddenly appears in an evening gown and sings Cry Me a River directly to him. So that scene in this movie is a little homage to Frank Tashlin. Of course, the writers are pushing the envelope on fantasy and reality throughout the movie. Like they have a scene where they arrive at the Rockatorium, better known in real life as the Mayan, which is a porn theater in downtown LA. But at the Rockatorium, the Ramones arrive riding on a convertible and singing I Just Want to Be With You while walking down the sidewalk. Well, Alan Arkush had to talk them into lip syncing. They did not want to lip sync. They said that was fake. So we had to explain to them there's no other way to do a movie. You have to lip sync. He actually set up a screening of Hard Day's Night so he could point out how the Beatles lip synced that whole movie because he knew they all admired the Beatles. For those who don't know the story of the Ramones, they were a garage band formed in Forest Hills, Queens in 1974. And they had all been in previous bands, and they all went to Forest Hills High School, and they all adopted the same last name, Ramone. It was actually the idea of Dee Ramone, the bass player. He started the tradition, naming himself after the fake name that Paul McCartney used when he checked into a hotel. So they were one of the first big acts to become regulars at the legendary CBGB in the Bowery area of Manhattan. And they toured nonstop for 22 years. They did not record that much. They were a touring band. To me, their music sounds kind of wholesome, even though they were always billed as a punk band. And by the way, the soundtrack album for this movie is amazing. It's got Alice Cooper, it's got Chuck Berry, it's got Devo, it's got Brian Eno, it's got Eddie and the Hot Rods. But the main character, Riff Randall, is a composite of 3 girls that used to come into the Fillmore East once a week when Alan Arkush worked there in the late 60s, early 70s also. The Fillmore East, most people have forgotten that club by now, but I think it's torn down. I don't even think it's there. But it was a theater on what, at the time they called it the Lower East Side. Today there's the East Village. Fuck you. Anyway, Lower East Side. On 2nd Avenue and 6th Street in New York City, and it was owned by the famous impresario Bill Graham. And every famous band in the world came through there. Jimi Hendrix, Cream, the Grateful Dead, the Allman Brothers. The Allman Brothers played there so many times they were like a house band at CBGB. John Lennon and Yoko Ono, Frank Zappa, the Kinks, the Byrds, Van Morrison, Iron Butterfly, does anybody remember? Jefferson Airplane, Taj Mahal, Elvin Bishop, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. All right, so when you went there, the guy at the door checking your ticket, frisking you every night, that was Alan Arkush. And so when the Ramones first appear in the movie at the Rockatorium, the exterior of the Mayan, a porn theater, you will see Alan Arkush in a green football jersey portraying himself at the door of the Rockatorium doing his old job. Once the concert starts in this movie, it pretty much becomes a musical. So when you see all these dozens of people on the dance floor, be sure to spot the giant white rat. That's Rob Bottin, who would become famous for his special effects makeup work on The Fog, The Thing, RoboCop, Total Recall, Basic Instinct. That's Rob Bottin inside the giant white rat of his own design. He took a lot of punishment when the mosh pit started. And I also want to mention the real Don Steele, who plays Screamin' Steve, the DJ. He was one of the most popular DJs in the country, especially during his years at KHJ Boss Radio Los Angeles, where he was considered an expert on the history of rock and roll radio. And Roger Corman loved to use Don Steele in his movies. He told his directors, never write lines for Don Steele. Just give him the gist of what we're doing and let him go. And that's what happened with Rock and Roll High School, which is a cross between a Warner Brothers cartoon, a Jerry Lewis movie, and a Broadway musical. And in fact, the Do You Want to Dance scene with the entire company moving down the hallways of the school is, in my opinion, one of the most impressive sequences ever shot by a low-budget studio or any studio that does dance scenes. And in the classic standoff scene at the end of the movie, please note that the legendary Dick Miller plays the police chief, shaking his head about these ugly, ugly people who have taken over the high school. Reviews of this movie were universally negative. It had its supporters over the years, but it's only been recently that it developed a real following. It started playing midnight shows, often rotating with Eraserhead and Rocky Horror Picture Show. And then they had a big retrospective screening at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, not far from where Johnny Ramone is buried, and it kind of launched the film into a second life. And perhaps the two most successful people who worked on this film were James Cameron and Gail Ann Hurd. James Cameron did some of the special effects, and Gail Ann Hurd was Roger Corman's assistant. Roger called them, I asked Roger about this movie, he called this movie his idiot child. So he loved it more than other more serious flicks that he made. And Alan Arkush became one of our leading TV directors and producers, responsible for dozens of long-running TV series. All right, it's Gabba Gabba Hay time. You guys probably know where that comes from, right? It comes from Todd Browning's Freaks, because Joey Ramone was a cinephile. So let's look at those drive-in totals and get started. We have 4 dead mice, 17 sight gags, 1 cat fight, 1 record-burning bonfire, multiple food fights, freshman hazing, urinal head dumping, exploding mouse, exploding high school, giant dancing mouse, goldfish eating, extended Ramones concert, groupie face bashing, convertible rock, sidewalk rock, bedroom rock, bathroom rock, whiskey a go-go rock, straitjacket foo, rope burn foo, laundry cart foo, bra strap unfastening foo. Driving Academy Award nominations for Mary Warnoff as the totalitarian principal who says, do your parents know your Ramones? PJ Souls as the school rebel. Alan Arkush, the director, from channeling Busby Berkeley in the big student takeover dance scene. Vince Van Patten as the fumbling football captain who can't get laid. Paul Bartel as the music teacher who learns how to boogie. The real Don Steele as Screamin' Steve, the screaming DJ. Clint Howard as Eagle Burger, the Eagle Bower. The boys' room businessman who gives dating lessons and can take care of anything for a price. And the Ramones for learning how to lip sync. 4 stars. Anybody who doesn't like this movie should just be forced to watch Pretty in Pink and The Breakfast Club until their brain explodes. And if you feel it, we're in a big theater here. So if you feel it, once the concert starts, I think you ought to get up and dance. Gabba Gabba Hey! 4 stars, Joe Bob says check it out.